this is Brenda Bradley, owner of the Midpoint Cafe in Adrian, Texas, and you are listening to the Route 66 podcast.
Route 66, Route 66, right along with the Route 66 podcast. For talks with people living and working along the Mother Road. The main street of America, from Chicago to LA, bore a heavy, heavy load. Route 66, Route 66, sometimes historical paths aren't discovered. Until you're lost, right along, with the Route 66 podcast.
Hello and welcome aboard the Route 66 podcast, where talks with people living and working along the Mother Road. I'm your host, Anthony Arno, and I'd like to thank you for joining us here today on our journey. A very special thanks to my Patreon business supporters, including the Midpoint Cafe and Gilligan's Route 66 tours. They not only support the podcast, but also the Route 66 Scholarship Program as well. I want to give a special shout out to Alan Ewan from California and his little girl, first grader Haley, who you just heard sing the second half of the Route 66 jingle. Alan writes that they're flying out to Chicago this summer and will be driving back home to California along our famous highway. If you want to see a clip of them singing that jingle, just log on to Route66podcast.com for this episode, and you'll see the both of them driving down the road and singing the jingle together. Today is part 2 of our 3-part series featuring the beginning, middle, and end of Route 66. My guest today is Brenda Bradley, owner of the Midpoint Cafe in Adrian, Texas. Our next episode will feature part 3 with Dan Rice, and the whole story about him putting the Route 66 end sign on the Santa Monica Pier, which isn't where highways normally end, on a pier overlooking the Pacific Ocean. But he'll tell us all about that story. Listener feedback. Rob Henry from Madison, Wisconsin. Hi, Anthony. I really enjoy the podcast and just listened to your interview with Dave Clark. Though I live in Wisconsin, I'm from Cicero, Illinois, and my father and grandfather were the previous owners of Henry's Drive-In on Route 66. Rick Hall of Portland, Oregon. I've always loved history as it pertains to the United States, and my wife loves puzzles. Last week, she completed a Route 66 puzzle, and I was so intrigued that I started looking into Route 66, and I came across your podcast. We're looking at a trip, hopefully this fall, along Route 66. I find myself getting lost in all the experiences you and your guests discuss on the podcast. Thanks for an excellent experience and history lesson. Thank you both Rob and Rick for sharing your thoughts about the podcast with us here. You know, there are less than 30 days remaining for the Route 66 Scholarship Program for students in grades K through college. Awards range from $25 to $500, and students are encouraged to submit their own personal interpretation of Route 66 in their own special way. They're encouraged to listen to past episodes of the podcast for ideas and topics that may be of interest as a starting point. Students do not need to live along the road, but should simply have an interest in promoting and preserving the Mother Road. And I'd like to thank my special group of Patreon supporters who are not only supporting this podcast, but also the scholarship program as well. And they include Mary Beth Busatill from Florida, Jim Crabtree, California, Mike Fort, Route 66 author and photographer Shelley Graham, and also my guest on episode number 10, where she talks about her book, Tales from the Coral Court Motel. Kristen Hackinson from Washington State, Rich Havlick from Minnesota, Mary Nicholson from Pennsylvania, Brian Sawyer from Indiana, and from the United Kingdom, Charlie Beaton. The business supporters for the podcast include the Midpoint Cafe in Adrian, Texas, and Gilligan's Route 66 Tours. They offer complete guided tours of Route 66 with your own Ford convertible Mustang, accommodations at historic Route 66 motels, and breakfast every morning. For more information, please visit gilligansroute66.com. And I invite you to become a Patreon supporter, where we have several levels. If you pledge just $5 per month, you not only have early access to the last episode featuring Windy City Road Warrior Dave Clark, but you'll also receive an additional 15 minutes of audio where Dave talks about starting a Route 66 trip in Chicago, including restaurants and diners such as Miller's Pub, Henry's Drive-In, which we just heard from in listener feedback, the Castle Gas Station, Chicago Board of Trade Building, the Ohio House, and are there any more vintage motels along Route 66 in Illinois? For those who can pledge $10 per month, they'll also receive voting rights in the annual Route 66 Scholarship Program. Also entered to win Route 66 related material in our monthly drawing. And the winner this month is Mary Nicholson from Pennsylvania. Mary, you won a bag of Route 66 brand sweet and salty Chicago-style snack mix. Congratulations. We also have a business level for mention of your business along the road, which you heard at the very beginning of the show. Thank you to the Midpoint Cafe and Gilligan's Route 66 Tours. If you're a monthly Patreon member between now and June 30th, we're going to send one lucky winner an official bag of Route 66 brand Texas Tornado-style snack mix, since this episode features the middle of Route 66 in Adrian, Texas. Today I'd like to share with you listener feedback in response to the question, what is your favorite Route 66 theater? Here's Andy from Western Pennsylvania.
Hello, my name is Andy from Pennsylvania. My favorite theater along the route was the Coleman Theater in Miami, Oklahoma. Oklahoma was my favorite state on the route in general. The stories to be told, the hard-working people of Oklahoma. But the Coleman was a time capsule to a better age. The look, the feel of the theater was just different than any of the others. It definitely took you back in time, and I think along the route, that's why we love it so much. Is it's the closest thing we get to time travel.
Thanks, Andy. Andy is a car guy, and he fixed up a car recently for a trip down the entire route with his mother. And when they reached the West Coast, they scrapped the car and flew back home. Of course, they had a trip of a lifetime, between the car breaking down during the drive, driving away from Lucille's in Oklahoma with his mother's eyeglasses on the car, and of course a stay at the Blue Swallow Motel in Tucumcari, New Mexico. Yep, the Coleman Theater in Miami, Oklahoma. I spent an entire day out there last summer, touring both the Coleman and the local cemetery, where British cadets came here to learn how to fly, but never made it back home due to a tragic accident. And Miami is their final resting place. One of the many future episodes right here on the podcast. For this month, let's make the topic the best Route 66 stops with children. For Alan and his daughter, who are probably listening to this as they're driving westward. What's your suggested Route 66 attraction for the youngest generation of roadies? I'll be giving away a bag of Route 66 brand Texas Tornado-style snack mix. Simply visit the Route 66 podcast webpage and click Send Voicemail tab on the right side to record a 30-second message where you see the microphone tab. Good luck. And now the trivia question for today's show. On the last episode, I featured Windy City Road Warrior Dave Clark. Here's the question. While most people start their Route 66 journey in Chicago, at Adams and Michigan, underneath the begin sign, is there an end sign for the traveler beginning in California and ending in Chicago? The answer after today's show. When we think of Route 66, we often think of an east to west passage from Chicago to Santa Monica. And that's a lot of pavement between those 2,278 miles for the traveler to stop and absorb the rich history of the world's most famous highway. Today we're visiting with the Midpoint Cafe, exactly at the halfway point of Route 66, at mile marker 1139. And as the sign says, when you're here, you're halfway there. Please welcome to the Route 66 podcast, Brenda Bradley, owner of the Midpoint Cafe in Adrian, Texas. Brenda, how are you doing today?
I'm fine. How about yourself?
Good. Thank you for joining us here on the podcast.
You're welcome.
Brenda, what is your earliest memory of Route 66?
Believe it or not, you aren't going to believe this. It was about 25 years ago when I first moved into this town. The earliest memory of mine, anyway, was of Route 66. I don't remember thinking about it or anything else prior to that.
Now, where are you originally from then?
Originally from Michigan, graduated out of California.
And what made you relocate to Adrian, Texas?
Race horses, believe it or not. we run race horses, and then I divorced that gentleman and met another gentleman whose grandfather was a part of this town.
And how did you get involved in the restaurant business along one of the most famous highways in the world?
I worked at a place called Stuckey's, and when Dennis came in to buy this place, he asked me to come work for him, and so I did.
And we'll talk more about Dennis a little bit later in the program. So when I travel the road, I meet with people who own businesses on Route 66. Kevin Mueller of the Blue Swallow. And he was actually looking to buy a pizzeria, and he wound up buying a motel in Tucumcari, New Mexico. And he mentioned in that talk that he had no idea how popular Route 66 was. Now, you had worked for Dennis, correct?
Yes. I agree. I didn't realize it was as popular either.
And then you had worked for him for about 5 years, and then eventually what put you into a position to purchase the Midpoint Cafe?
Dennis's health was kind of touch and go there for a little bit, and so he decided that maybe he needed to go home because he was here for 7 months out of the year, and so he just asked me if I'd like to buy it, and I said yes. And
do you have any regrets in those 2 years?
No, not at all. No, not at all. I love this place. I love all the people. The people make me smile.
And what's one thing you wish you knew before purchasing the Midpoint Cafe that you know now?
Maybe a little bit more about Route 66 because I'm still a little bit green on it, but the people are just, they'll fill you in. They'll help you learn. So it's working out great for me. I mean, I love it. I've got all the backing from the community. My surrounding areas, everybody's just wonderful.
And tell us a little bit about Adrian, Texas. How large of a town is it?
Well, it's got 160 people in it. That's including some of the cats and dogs. Anyway, the people are just wonderful here. They just are. I don't know. We have a school. It has more than 200 people in it. Our little town is just amazing. I wouldn't live anywhere else.
And what are some of the other more popular attractions that you're closest to regarding Route 66? Like, I know you're about 25 miles from Glen Rio, 50 miles from Amarillo, and 65 from Tucumcari. Yeah, well, of course, you got the Blue Swallow in Tucumcari, like you were saying. And then Glen Rio is the ghost town. There's also a Russell's Travel Center right up the road from that has an old antique car museum you can walk through. In Amarillo, you've got 6th Street. You got all them wonderful people up and down 6th Street. And then you start going to the east a little bit more, and you've got Groom, and then you've got Shamrock. You've got all those along that area there. So tell us about the early history of the Midpoint Cafe. How did it originally get started? Well, I know that it was Zellas when it first started out, and then Dub and Jesse ended up with it next. I'm pretty sure. I'm not real positive about that, but it started in the late 20s. Anyway, Dub and Jesse ended up with it,
and then Fran. That's just about all I know. I'm sure there might have been something in between there, but...
So Fran purchased it in the 1990s, and how did she make it popular?
Oh, she kind of brought it all to life.
How?
in my opinion, she's like the iconic one of the bunch. Not only is it in the Cars movie, and she's Flo, the VA cafe, and but she brought it into this area alive, is what I think.
And now Fran was known for her ugly crust pies. Tell us a little bit about that, Brenda.
Oh yeah, she was known for. She had a lady that came in and was making her pies, and her name is Joanne Harwell, and she did a wonderful job for Fran. I believe that Fran's personality has played a bunch of part in that. Yeah, and we keep the pies going today. As far as that goes. Yes, we sure do. Mm-hmm.
So at the height of the tourism season, how many pies would you say you go through a day?
A day, I'm not real positive a day, but last year we went through over 1,500 pies. My mom was making all the pies.
Wow.
We sold them piece by piece, and she made over 75 cobblers. So we're pretty busy.
What is the most requested type of pie there?
The coconut is probably the best seller, but we have chocolate peanut butter, our Elvis, which is chocolate peanut butter and banana. We have pecan, apple, and Tennessee whiskey chocolate pecan, but they all sell good, but I think our coconut is probably the best seller.
And how did the name come about for the ugly crust pie?
Billy Connolly, I believe, is the one that brought it into play when he misquoted and said the ugly pie. But as far as the beginning of it, Joanne Harwell's grandmother was showing her how to make pie crust, and hers didn't come out quite as pretty as her grandmother's, and so she called it the ugly crust pie.
Wow, interesting. Now, is Fran still around? Is she still in the picture?
Yeah, Fran's still here, yeah. Yes, she is. She owns the curio shop next door, and she is, her health has been a little bit down here lately.
Now, has the pie been featured on any, popular Food Network TV shows or by popular critics?
It's been in a few magazines that they've wrote, like the Texas Highway magazine and the Panhandle magazine out of Amarillo. And for me, I don't know.
Right. And what is the pie called today? Is it still called the Ugly Crust Pie?
It's called the Midpoint Ugly Pies.
And why the name change then? Is it still the same original recipe?
Because that was her grandmother's name for her pies.
Oh.
And then Billy Connolly, like I said, misquoted it and called it the Ugly Pies, and we just ran with it. Or Dennis did.
Now let's talk a little bit about Dennis. He was there from 2012 to 2018, and I've met him in the past, and he was quite a character. I know he's put a lot of work into the sign across the street. Tell our listeners about the most popular sign in that town.
That sign right there probably brings us in more business than you know. We had 84 countries come in last year. That sign is amazing.
And what is the sign? What does it look like?
Oh, it's got the Midpoint logo on it, and it's got all the stepping stones around it. And when Dennis was putting the stepping stones down, he actually found the sign of Zellas, which is the very first owner of this place. And of course, he donated it to the museum over in Vega, the Milburn Museum over in Vega. But yeah, it still had the paint on it and everything. It was pretty cool, actually, when he was putting those stepping stones down.
And Dennis was quite interesting. He's from the East Coast. He was a retired engineer. When's the last time you spoke with him? How's he doing? How is his health?
He was doing good when I talked to him last time. Him and Donna both were doing okay. He's back to work engineering, I think, again. He'd like to open up a pie shop. I don't know if he's got quite that far yet, but...
Now, Brenda, you also have a gift shop there. What is the most popular item that you sell at the Midpoint Gift Shop?
Probably the Midpoint Shield.
And is that a magnet, or how large is that?
No, it's a shield. It looks like your Route 66 shield, but it has the midpoint on it. It's a pretty good sign. It's a pretty good size sign. It's not real big, I mean, they're able to take it home on the plane with them and stuff.
Okay.
And they're not real heavy.
So since you've been the owner of the Midpoint Cafe, what are some of the major changes or renovations that you've been involved in?
Well, there hasn't been. I mean, no, Dennis had it going. Fran and Dennis had it going really good. I mean, as far as that goes, if it's not broke, don't fix it.
Right. Yeah.
Other than that, I painted the sign back across because they redone the roads, and people were wanting the Midpoint sign back across the road, and that's what we done. The Route 66 Association helped me do that. Yeah.
So what's one thing you did not know about owning the Midpoint Cafe, even though you worked there for 5 years, that you now know about today?
There's a lot of work involved. When I went home at 5 o'clock every night, that was pretty cool, But now that I don't go home at all.
Now I know Dennis lived on the property. Do you also live on the property, or do you live in Adrian?
No, honey, I live right across the street, though.
Okay.
I can actually see the cafe from my house.
And during a typical day during the summer season, tell our listeners what a typical day is like for you at the cafe. What time do you start? Tell us your routine.
We open at 8 o'clock in the morning, and we do breakfast until 11, and then we do lunch until 3 o'clock when we shut the grill down, and we do pies and coffee all day long, of course, and drink. And and in between is a lot of talking.
Yeah.
I like to visit.
So tell us, Brenda, about some of the more memorable visitors you've had at the cafe.
Well, when Dennis owned it, we had William Shatner come through. But you know what? I think that every person that walks through that door that is traveling Route 66 is special. So in my mind, it would be the people that come through, period.
Now, when William Shatner visited, were you on duty at that time? Were you working?
Yes, I was. He told me I made the best fried bologna sandwich he ever ate.
And is that a popular mainstay at the Midpoint Cafe?
Oh, yeah. Oh, definitely. Yeah, definitely.
And tell us what's in that sandwich.
Of course, you have your bologna and grilled onions and cheese on a bun. It's a very good sandwich.
And what was the conversation like with William Shatner?
Well, I didn't visit with him a whole lot. That was Dennis's deal, but he was a very nice man. Him and his wife. His wife was a very nice lady also.
Now, at the Midpoint Cafe, Brenda, do you have annual people who visit every year traveling the route?
We have repeat business. Yes, we do. Even from overseas, we have repeat business, yeah.
And does anybody stand out? What country are they from, and what can you tell us about their visit every time you see them?
Oh, my gosh. I don't know if I can answer that question right now. I'd have to think about that.
Well, think about someone, either, just a Route 66 visitor that I'm sure my listeners would enjoy hearing about.
Well, like Kevin and Nancy. They come over quite often. I get my people from Route 66. They come in like the Route 66 Association, and they're they come in all the time and have some lunch or breakfast with us, whichever. And but as far as the people go, yeah, I do. I get repeat business. Now, to remember their names, sometimes I'm not real good at that. I call everybody honey.
So, Brenda, what's it like when you look out the window and you see a tour bus pulling up? What's the game plan for everyone?
Oh, my gosh.
Tell us.
Everybody run. Usually they call, though, and we usually know they're coming, and so we have, we have the coffee cups all set up, and we have, sometimes I make cinnamon rolls, sometimes muffins, just depending on what they might ask for, and of course, we still even say, oh, my gosh, even though that we know they're coming up.
Yeah. Now, how many seats do you have there?
Because we can only accommodate about 55 people in here, so... And then there was times, like last year, our tour guide had 55 bikers in a group, and then we had a couple buses come in the same day. You couldn't hardly turn around in this building. Oh, my gosh, it was just amazing. But everybody was happy when they left and smiling, so that's all that matters.
For that Route 66 experience. Now, are you open year-round there?
No, sir. No, sir, I'm not. I close October 31st, and I'm closed all the way till March 1st.
So you were telling us about the movie Cars. What was the reference with the Midpoint Cafe and the movie Cars?
It is the VA Cafe. and Miss Flo is actually Miss Fran. And the two Miata twins are the two waitresses that worked here at the time, which is Christina and Mary Lou. And I have fun with that. And the kids, I think that the kids have actually brought the U.S. people back into it a little bit more, because, man, they listen, they know, you know what I mean? And so they'll come traveling, they'll go, "Where's Miss Flo? Where's Miss Flo?" Of course, she's next door, but anyway, she gives out cards with signed postcards and stuff with Miss Flo on front. Oh, I just love it.
Brenda, what else do you sell at the gift shop that our listeners might be interested in learning about?
Oh, I have shirts with our logo on it, and I have a bunch of the car figurines, of course, and cups with our logo on it, cups with Route 66 on it, a little bit of everything. I try to keep a little bit of everything in there, as far as magnets and postcards and shot glasses and just stuff like that, stickers.
And how busy does it get there during the summer? Is there a wait?
Not a wait necessarily, but there can be a little bit of a wait, yeah. But not often.
Brenda, what does Route 66 mean to you?
Oh, you know what? It's all about the people for me. It's all about the people. I love the people. I love to visit. I'm very good at talking. I will visit with you if you're grumpy, and I will make you smile. It's kind of a challenge. But anyway, no, I mean, it's all about the people for me. It really is. I love the people. It's just what I like best. I don't know what to say. I love the route. The route is great, but the people are amazing.
And where would our listeners find you? Would you usually be behind the grill, or would you be helping out in the front?
Oh, sometimes a little bit of both. I cook a lot, and I also am out front a lot. So, and then there's, now that my mother's not with me no longer, I'm making pie as well. So you own the Midpoint Cafe in Adrian, Texas. What do you like to do when you have time off? How do you go traveling? How do I go traveling? Well, racehorses has taken me all over the country. But as far as just by ourselves, I go travel to my grandkids. And where are they? Are they locally or? No. I've got one granddaughter in Houston, and my son is down there. My youngest son is down there with my daughter, and he goes to Sam Houston College. And then I have another granddaughter here in Amarillo, and then I have two other ones in Buena Vista, Colorado, and that daughter owns a bakery up there. Oh, really? So what came first, you owning the Midpoint or her owning the bakery? I think they came just about the same time, if you want to know the honest God truth. And tell us the story. Do you share recipes with each other? What is she famous for up there? Oh, my daughter's good at everything she does. The bakery's doing really good. I think that her applesauce donuts are probably what sells the best the way she talks. But as far as sharing recipes, yeah, I've given her a little bit of information. So your daughter is up there in what city in Colorado? In Buena Vista. And what's the name of the bakery? It's called Lowback's. Okay, a big shout out to Lowback's Bakery in Buena Vista, Colorado. Well, thank you. She's good at what she does, too. You said how many people live in Adrian, Texas? 160. Well, give or take a few. And do the locals, especially the younger generation, do they understand how significant Route 66 is in American culture? I'd like to think they do. I'd like to think maybe I bring some of that to them. I really would. My son worked here. My son, of course, was valedictorian when he left, and so I think that he's helped bring a little light into the town as far as the youngsters go. But I didn't even realize it until I moved into town. So I like to think that the town brings that kind of light of life alive. Right. I know when I travel the road, a lot of times the youngsters I meet, like the college-age kids, have no idea about the historical background of Route 66 right there at their front door. Well, now that's how I felt. That's kind of where I fell in at. I didn't have no idea until I moved in. And of course, I was a little bit older when I moved in here, but even at that, I didn't have any idea until I really got into it, of course, Yeah, and it's definitely a generational thing. I mean, when Cars was released
back 10, 15 years ago, a lot of people learned about Route 66, and I know traffic and tourism was up like 33%.
And that's when our American traffic started to rise as far as more people coming through, because 95% of our business comes from overseas.
Wow, that's a big number.
I know, I kind of thought so too, but I think here in the last, like you say, 5 or 6 years, I think the American people have been enlightened with it.
Absolutely, yeah. So, Brenda, what's next on your bucket list?
I don't know, honey. This is my bucket list right here.
All right, so how can our listeners get in touch with you if they want to learn a little bit more about the Midpoint Cafe, or maybe if they want to purchase a T-shirt from you?
They can go online to Route 66 Midpoint Cafe at gmail.com, or they can call the place, which is 806-538-6379, or you can look us up online on our Facebook page.
And we'll have links at the Route66podcast.com. Brenda, is there anything else you want to say before we say goodbye?
Thank you to everybody for everything, and come see me if you haven't been here yet.
Oh, it's a great stop, a great picture spot. You'll have a good time, I promise. Exactly. And thank you for taking the time to talk with us today.
Oh, thank you, honey. You too.
That's Brenda Bradley from the Midpoint Cafe in Adrian, Texas. Brenda is a remarkable person if you ever get a chance to meet her. She's just one of the many business owners along the route that has Route 66 throughout her blood. The Midpoint is one of those Route 66 diners in a small town where Brenda will come over to your table, sit down, and talk with you all about your trip. When you go to visit Brenda, tell her the Route 66 podcast guy sent you. And now the trivia question for today's show. On the last episode, I featured Dave Clark, the Windy City Road Warrior. Here's the question. Is there an end sign for those who have completed their Route 66 trip in Chicago? Yes, it's 1 block over on Jackson and Michigan at the original ending point of Route 66, which was also the original beginning point of Route 66. But due to the configuration of the streets in Chicago today and the one-way signs, Adams and Michigan is a safer spot to put that sign for people to pull over. Next time on the show, it's part 3 of the current series featuring the end of Route 66. We'll visit with Dan Rice, owner of the 66 to Cali souvenir shop on the Santa Monica Pier. Here's a clip of my talk with Dan.
Now, you should know the pier has never actually been the official end. It's always been the traditional end. Many people never went to the official end. They saw the ocean, and they just traveled 2,500 miles. So they would continue down to that intersection. From there, they could see the pier. Now, if you've just driven 2,500 miles and you have the opportunity to drive onto the pier and put your tires over, the ocean blue, and in those days, people could drive onto the pier, I always thought, why is there nothing to mark Route 66 on the pier? I mean, it just didn't make sense. But nobody knew the history. So the sign that you see on the pier never existed until I built it. Truth is, we weren't putting it back up. We were putting it up for the first time. And neither of us knew that. If you run a marathon and there's no finish line at the end, it's very anticlimactic. So I knew that if I gave people a finish line, they would come. I knew I could make a difference in that way. So we did that. We put the end sign up, and all day long people started taking their pictures, and that eventually led us to putting up the end of the trail sign.
That's Dan Rice, another Route 66 pioneer, right here on the Route 66 podcast. From his initial drive along the road to an accident that left him with a traumatic brain injury, his numerous attempts to convince the city of Santa Monica that Route 66 fans were yearning for an endpoint, and much, much more. Don't miss my talk with Dan Rice right here on the next episode of the Route 66 podcast. Please encourage any students you know to submit an entry into the Route 66 Scholarship Program. The deadline is June 30th. And let me know your favorite Route 66 stop for kids. and you might win a bag of Route 66 brand Texas Tornado Style Snack Mix. Just leave a message right on our homepage at route66podcast.com. And that's where you can see videos from past guests, including Haley singing the Route 66 jingle with her dad. Thank you for taking the journey with us here at the Route 66 podcast. I'm your host, Anthony Arno. Be well.